Good day to you, everyone. Today, I will teach you about the CRUD operation for MySQL. So, what is CRUD? So, CRUD are the four fundamental operations in MySQL or any SQL apps like PHP, MySQL, DB, MS Access, and more. So, let's start with the letter C. C stands for create. The create operation allows us to create records and data for our databases. Read. The read operation allows us to be able to display our data that we have created. Update. The update operation allows us to modify our data when they are needed. And lastly, we have the delete or drop operation. The delete or drop operation allows us, the users, to be able to completely delete records if necessary. In MySQL terminology, we prefer to use drop rather than delete, but this might change depending on the context or SQL in general. Let us now move on to my PHP admin. And now let's move on to my PHP admin where I will demonstrate these four fundamental operations. CRUD. Welcome back. And now we're in the PHP My Admin webpage where we will demonstrate the four fundamental operations of MySQL, which is CRUD, create, read, update, and delete. Let's start off by creating a database. So, first things first is to name our database. Since I've already done this, the data fields have memorized my recent inputs. So we're just gonna type in TCU underscore F 2021, which is my college and current section. After that, we're not gonna mess with any other setting, and we go straight into the create button. And done. And now that we have created our database, we now have to make our table. So we're gonna name our table student info. Student underscore info, wherein we're gonna have a bunch of columns, fields, or attributes. So first off, let's count how many fields we're gonna use. There's gonna be the ID that will serve as the primary key. There will be the first name, middle name, last name, extension name, course, section, and year level. And in total, we're gonna have 8 attributes for this table. After that, we're just gonna click go. And as you can see, a bunch of input fields have appeared in front of our screen. Here, we will create the different attributes, what type of attributes they are, and how they will affect the other data fields. So first up, let's start with the primary key, which is the ID. So our ID is gonna be an integer. We're not gonna put any length or values as the ID or the primary key will automatically create the values. Over here, we're gonna just select primary key. Not gonna put any size there. So we're just gonna proceed. Click go. And then we're gonna check the AI box. AI checkbox. AI means auto increment. This allows the primary key to automatically increment whenever a new record has been created in the table. We're just gonna do that. That's it for the primary key. And now let's move on to the other data field that we will need for the student info table. The first is the first name. Here, the data type that we're gonna use is gonna be the varchar. The variable character data type allows us to input any amount of values into our data field. But to make things neat, well, we're gonna put a maximum amount of values here, 50. but varchar works by no matter how many values to input. For example, let's type in my name, Jennifer, Jenfer. That's 6 letters. The memory allocation will only allocate those 6 letters and not the remaining spaces in which we put in the 50 maximum length value. And that's the main purpose on why we're gonna use varchar. You can put any type of characters from numbers, letters to special symbols, and it will only allocate whatever you put in it, excluding the remaining spaces. Then we're gonna proceed to our middle name, same as the first name, last name, extension name. We're gonna do varchar. Then we're gonna do the course, still a varchar. Section, still a varchar. And lastly, the year level, which it's gonna stay as an integer. Now let's put in some length and values. For the names, I would like to use 50 as my default maximum value. And for the course and section, I want them to be very short, so let's assume we're gonna need a maximum of 20 characters. For the year level, it's just gonna be 1 digit, so we're just gonna put in 1. And lastly, we want to put in a null index in the extension name, because there are many cases where the extension name is empty, and so we want to do something about it if they are empty. So for the default, I want to put in null so that I can immediately identify if one field is empty and not just random varchar spaces. And now we are done with creating the table. To finalize this, we just have to click save, and that will save our progress here. And voila, we now have a student info table in our TCU F2021 database. And now we're gonna move on to adding the datas or records themselves, in which we're gonna demonstrate the create operation. There are actually 2 ways to insert or create records. The first method that we're gonna use is the easiest of the 2. So up here in the tabs here, we're gonna go into the insert tab. Here we can see a bunch of fields that we have to input. You can add or decrease the amount of new rows over here as much as you like. Once we put in the data that we need here for each row, we're just gonna click the go, and then we're done. So now let us demonstrate that. First, let's go with the ID. The ID is automatic, as I've explained earlier. Therefore, we're just gonna leave it be. Now let's start with the first name. So I'm gonna use a spreadsheet here as my reference for the data that we're gonna use. So let's start with myself. So my first name is Jennifer Anthony. My middle name is Amit. My last name is Renhan. I don't have any extension name. My course is BSCS. My section is F2021, and I am a first year. And there we go. For the extension name, since we don't have any values there, it's gonna be null or empty. We're just gonna click go, and voila, we have inserted a data. Let's go to browse and check it out. Here we see the data we have just inputted. Here we see my ID, which has been automatically placed, my name, the null extension name because I have no extension name, therefore it is null or empty, my course section, and my year level. No errors so far, we're doing good. And now I will demonstrate the second method of inserting or creating data. So now let's move on to the SQL tab over here. The SQL tab allows us to input a variety of commands or code that will allow us to modify our database. So what we want here is to insert a new data record. So we're just gonna click insert here. As you can see here, we got insert into command. Now over here is the name of our table, and inside the parentheses are the fields in that table, all enclosed in that symbol that is under the tilde button under the escape. I would like to note that this symbol is very different from the single quote that we usually use. Difference is not that big, we just have to take it into our mind. Always remember, we are not using single quotations. We are using that one symbol with the tilde under the escape button, which is shift tilde. That will result in the tilde, but just click the tilde and it will input that symbol. Okay, now let's move on. So over here we have the values command. Here we will input the values ourselves. Okay, first things first, since the ID is automated, we don't want to put any values in that. Therefore, we're just gonna remove it here in our command. Done. Do that here too. Done. Oops, forgot about that. And now we're gonna put in our data. First, let's go with classmate of mine named Kenneth. Kenneth, middle name, election, last name Igot. Next is the extension name, which is none. There's gonna be empty. Next is the course, which is PSCS. Then the section F 2021. Lastly, the year level, which is 1. After that, we just have to double check. Looking good so far. And now we're just gonna move to the bottom right, where we will find the go button. And let's check. No errors. So it's been inserted in the row ID number 2. Let's check it out. And there we go. That's our second record. And now we're just gonna put in some more. I'm gonna do it in the background. So in total, we're gonna have 5 data records. So I'm just gonna pause the recording and I'll come back once we have a total of 5 records. And now we're back with 5 data records in total. So far, we have demonstrated the create or insert operation. And now we're gonna try to do the other 3. So first, let us display the full name, the course, and section. This operation is gonna be the read operation. So let's move to the SQL tab. And here, we would like to do the select command. With the select command, we'll be able to display or read the data in our table. So here, in the select command, we're just gonna remove the asterisk and replace it with the data that we need. First up, is the full name, which is the first name, middle name, last name, extension name, if ever. Oops. The course, and the section. From student info, and since we don't have a specific row that we want to display, we're just gonna remove the where command, and that's it. So we're gonna select the following fields from the student info table. We will be displaying all of the data that we need, that we have stated in the select command. Here in the select command, these are the fields, the attributes, or the columns that we want to display. Let us now go try it out. And it worked. As you can see, we have fully displayed our data over here. And oops, it looks like we have some missing data in some of the records. And here I think it would be a good time to demonstrate the update operation. So now let's go back to our SQL tab, and then we're going to select the update command. Here, from what we've seen in our table, we want to modify or update the record for ID number 4, or Mr. Joshua, Mark Joshua over here. Want to correct his course, section, and year level. And so we move again to the SQL tab. Let's select update. So we're just gonna remove some unnecessary. So we want the course, section, year level, where ID is equals to number 4, if I remember correctly. Let me just copy paste this and let me double check. Number 4, yep, I'm correct. ID number 4. So now let's just change his course to BSCS, section to F2021, year level 1. And that should be it. Let's double check our code here. Looking good, looking good. And now we can select the go button. 1 row affected. Let us check. And there we go. We have fixed Mark Joshua's records in the table. And that is how the update operation works. Let us do another example. Here I want to change the third student's name. So I want to change the student in our ID number 3. So let us pick someone from our spreadsheet here. Okay, we want Mr. Ayud Todd in our third row. Let's go to the update. We don't want to change the ID here. We just want to change the name. So we're gonna remove the course, section, and year level, where ID is equals to 3. Remember, we're doing this where ID is equals 3 because we're using the primary tree as the reference point in which where we can immediately find the row that we want to modify or do something with it. Let us now move on to changing the values here. We want John Stephen. What's his middle name? Lateros. So Plateros. Last name would be Ayutod. Extension name would be empty. Looking good, looking good. And now we're just gonna click go. One row affected. Let us go back to our table. And here we go. We have successfully updated ID number 3. And lastly, we have the delete operation, delete or drop operation. Here, we would like to delete one of the records. It's actually very easy. I actually think that you can already see the buttons that we're gonna use to delete a record. So here we want to delete the first record. There are two ways of doing it, which is clicking the button over here, wherein you have to select the record first and then click delete, or you can click the delete button on the record itself. So to make it very easy for us, we're just going to click the delete button on the record itself, which is over here for ID number 1. Delete. Are you sure you want to delete? Yes, I would like to demonstrate the process of deleting a record. So let's just click OK. And there we go. I also forgot to mention that the SQL tab also has a function to delete a record. So let us try and use that. Delete. So delete from table student info, where I would like to delete ID number 5. Good enough. Go. Yes, I would like to delete ID number 5. One row affected. That means that ID number 5 exists. Go back to browse, and boom, number 5 is now gone. And yeah, that is it for the CRUD operations. I hope that I was able to present it in a clear and efficient manner, and I hope that I am able to explain it very well. Thank you, Mr. Alojado, for teaching us, and that will be goodbye.